Trucker Dump for October 18th, 2010, Episode 55, The EOBR Myth.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com. Resources that help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
G'day, folks. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Todd McCann here. Today we're going to discuss something that has many drivers scared spitless. The thing is, I can't really understand what the big deal is. Today's topic is the EOBR myth. Quick, what's the leading cause of trucking accidents? If you were to ask that question to the non-trucking public, they'd probably tell you that trucker fatigue was the culprit. They'd be wrong. It's not their fault. The media, our lawmakers, and many interest groups are cramming that idea into their ears with one of those cannonball stuffing doohickeys. I'm not going to go into all the statistics on this here because, well, that's just not my bag, baby. Still, I'm not asking you to take one loudmouth trucker's opinion on this either. I let OOIDA do the dirty work. That's the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Check out the show notes for a link to an article on this. So what is the leading cause of truck accidents? Well, actually the leading cause is four-wheelers. In some studies, it's estimated as many as 71% of accidents involving a truck and a passenger vehicle are caused by the four-wheelers' actions, not the trucks. Putting that fact aside, the accidents caused by a truck driver are usually caused by driver error, not driver fatigue. Speeding, taking a turn too fast, improper lane changes, tailgating, and driving too fast for conditions are just a few of the things that cause truck accidents. Most of these kinds of accidents are the result of being in a hurry. Even when time isn't an issue, accidents are more likely to be caused by pure carelessness, not driver fatigue. Any honest trucker will back me up on this. Not counting time issues, the majority of close calls are caused by the stupidity of other drivers, reaching for your iPod, reading your map, eating, spilling your coffee, daydreaming about your lottery winnings, or being lost due to bad directions. Check out the podcast called Truckers Get Lost about that whole ball of frustration. The vast majority of truck drivers have the common sense to get off the road before we get too tired. Despite this well-known fact, the people in industries that know what's best for everyone else has decided that EOBRs are necessary to prevent these infrequent fatigue-related accidents. Now, I'm sure all my trucking friends have already heard of EOBRs. The acronym stands for Electronic Onboard Recorders. There's a link in the show notes for a full description of it. Basically, it's a tell-all device for truckers. It's what the black box is to the airline industry. If you haven't heard of them yet, you likely will soon enough. There's a major push by industry groups and lawmakers to make EOBRs mandatory in all commercial vehicles. There's a link to this article in the show notes too. While I do think EOBRs have their merits, I also believe them to be as important to preventing accidents as the Easter Bunny is to delivering presents on Christmas Eve. So what are the good points about EOBRs? Well, for one thing, they can detect sudden lane changes, hard braking, excessive speed, etc. That kind of information could come in handy when truckers are trying to prove themselves innocent of an accident. On the flip side, it could also be a prosecuting attorney's ace in the hole if you're as guilty as a drunk Alcoholic Anonymous member. Secondly, I believe EOBRs would succeed in keeping those rare renegade drivers in check. It would be kind of hard to run 2 logbooks and drive until your eyes are drooping like that weird old lady underarm flab with an EOBR installed. So that's a good thing. There are a couple of things that EOBR haters are worried about. First is the whole invasion of privacy issue. Sure, the box would show your company where you live when you go home, but who cares? They already know your address. And yes, it shows where you're currently located. Well, maybe if you don't want someone to know that you're at the nudie bar, you shouldn't be there in the first place. While I suppose that it could be the foot in the door to something more sinister, I'm just not that paranoid. And if you're driving like a crazy person, I don't mind the little box tattling on you. Another complaint is the cost. Now, I've never priced one of these puppies, but I've read that some of these units can cost as little as $300 to $400 to install. That's just a couple of weeks of G-string fodder for some of these guys. And if you're a company driver, you've got no call to complain about the cost at all. The company will be paying for it. The thing is, most company trucks already have some sort of EOBR in them. Our current satellite systems already show how fast we're going and our location at any given time. Therefore, many of us company drivers are already dealing with them. And what do you think electronic logbooks are? They're just glorified EOBR boxes. I know what some of you regular listeners are thinking, but you said you had fear and loathing of electronic logs. I did, and I still do to some extent. I don't know exactly how they work, so that's part of the mystery. But here's why I'm dreading the day that I get e-logs. Time management. The difference between our current satellite system or even a black box that's mounted under the driver's seat is no one's monitoring your satellite system unless something warrants an inquiry. But e-logs are monitored real time. If that thing is beeping at you, your dispatcher's seeing it too. This presents a problem. Admittedly, the way the vast majority of truckers do their logbooks is technically illegal. Still, most truckers don't run 2 logbooks and backlog trips either. We simply fudge a few things here or there to suit the situation. For example, let's say I'm going into the shipper the night before my morning appointment. Therefore, I'm not in any particular rush. If I hit a traffic jam just before I run out of hours, no big deal. As long as I don't have a DOT way station to deal with, I can just take my time getting to the shipper, get there 15 or 30 minutes later than technically legal, and show getting there when I had originally planned. Illegal? Yep. Driving 5 miles over the speed limit is too. Good thing none of us do that. The biggest problem I see with e-logs is that there will no longer be any wiggle room. Now if I'm almost out of hours when I hit that traffic jam, what happens? Well, I get tagged by my company for driving over my hours. Either that or traffic breaks free and I put the hammer down to bust my hump to the shipper, or any other safe parking spot, before the stinking e-log machine starts beeping at me. So I ask you, what's safer? Calmly driving 15 to 30 minutes over my allotted time, or driving like a Formula 1 driver injected with squirrel DNA to keep from going over my time limit? I imagine that it's going to feel like an episode of 24 every time I get behind the wheel. Is a trucker driving an 80,000-pound weapon something you want racing against the clock every day?
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Well, I got some really good feedback from the one called Truckers Get Lost, the do's and don'ts of giving directions. So let's get right to it. Jason says, well, I'd say this post is spot on. Great work. You nailed this one. I can't tell you how many 4-letter words I've said when getting Google directions. And yes, it sounds like a lot of work, but it would be nice. He's talking about the system I was talking about at the end, where I was saying that if somebody would give me $1 million and a computer programmer, we could make a service that every company could subscribe to. He goes on to say, map reading should be a priority item on a training list. Schools teach it. If you can properly read a map, you won't get lost. Very often. Yeah, that's for sure. But I always said you've not driven anywhere if you've not been lost in a tractor and trailer. Keep up the great work and be safe. Well, thanks, Jason. Man, I know what you mean about not being a real trucker until you find yourself lost in a tractor trailer. The feeling you get when you begin to realize that you may be lost is horrible. The sudden hot flash, the increased heart rate. Oh yeah, that's a rush of the worst kind. Droid Trucker writes in and says, my favorites are the leave 'em guessing ones, like exit 11, take right at 6th light. For one customer, this includes the light at the exit ramp. Another starts count once you're actually off the ramp. Well, Brian, you got that right. Vagueness is just as bad as wrong directions, and that stoplight thing is a pet peeve of mine. I can't believe I left that out of the post. Lawson Bulk says, I also hate directions that count stoplights. It's amazing how many drivers can't count to 6. I do like landmarks, though. I make a lot of deliveries in the boonies at night. You can't read street signs if they're not even there, and knowing what business is supposed to be on the corner I need to turn on helps. The state of Illinois is now considering a law that would ban any GPS from a truck that's not a truck GPS because so many trucks using car GPS have ended up on roads and bridges they don't belong on. I see this to be a future trend for all states. If you're too lazy to learn how to read a map, you really need to get out of the truck and find a new line of work. Map reading is the easy part of the job. Yep, well said, my good man. After reading this comment, I'm considering altering my original post. You definitely make a valid point for using landmarks. They certainly are useful after dark, so here's the compromise I'm willing to make. Drivers, it's now officially okay for you to use landmarks, such as Taco Bell or 6 stoplights. But if you use them without an accompanying street name, you'll be squished against a trailer interior wall with a ratcheting load lock until your chest caves in. Fair enough? Seriously, folks, turn left at the Taco Bell doesn't cut it. Turn left at the Taco Bell, Burrito Avenue, does. Kevin McCaig says, "There's so many great points in this post and in the comments. I'm baffled as to why new drivers refuse to learn to use a map. How hard is it anyway? Then again, I've always been fascinated by maps. I'm a geek." Aren't we all geeks, Kevin? Although, not many map geeks I know. Anyway, he goes on to say, "The best solution when going to a new location is to call the receiver at the place you're visiting. The receptionist might know how to get to where you're going, but be clueless about the low clearance bridge or her normal route to work. One of the companies I used to work for actually had drivers who would intentionally give incorrect directions to be given to other drivers. After finding myself on a residential street in the middle of the night, I rarely looked at their directions again." I can't imagine why they would do that, but anyway. All this talk about directions reminds me of a somewhat related story. Before becoming a truck driver, I had a crappy retail job. Nearly every week, someone would call the store asking if the store is on the right or the left side of the road. "Well," I'd reply, "I guess that depends entirely upon your starting location." Like you said, right side or left side of the road instructions help approximately 50% of the time. I'd say it's exactly 50% of the time. Good one though, Kevin. You know, you do make a good point though. I can't believe I forgot to put this in the post. Thanks for the reminder. Listen, kiddos, Kevin is correct. If you can call a customer for directions, by all means do so. Some will even have directions listed as a menu item on the message. If they don't, always talk to someone who works on the docks or in the shipping receiving office. Just as Kevin said, the receptionist is the worst person in the world to get directions from. Funny story about calling your retail job for directions. Love your response. I can almost see their eyebrows furrow on the other end of the telephone line. You know, I half expect that from normal folks, but why so many truckers can't grasp this is mind-boggling. Lisa Nowak says, "How can anybody not be able to read a map? It's not rocket science." I remember a friend in North Carolina telling me how people gave directions down there. They always included one final landmark. "If you get to the Piggly Wiggly, you done gone too far." I'm sure that would be really useful to someone in a big rig. He also said someone once gave him a set of directions that including turning right at the 3 cows grazing in the field. Well, that's hilarious, Lisa. I sure hope one of those cows aren't pregnant. Aaron says, "It sounds like to me you can't go wrong with a good old map. Map rating should be part of every truck school's criteria. Everyone knows that Google Maps doesn't always get it right." Well, Aaron, apparently not everyone knows Google Maps aren't always right. I can name a few dispatchers. FL Trucker Wife says, "My husband has tons of maps on the truck with him, but not every place is on the map. Little-known streets and back roads that his company like to send him are not usually there. Back roads to avoid toll roads? Big headache. Oh, and don't get me started on his driving partner. All he does is cry all day about not having a new Qualcomm with a GPS on it. He won't even look at a map." And she goes on to say, yes, he is requesting a new partner. Well, good for him. And I know all about the headaches of avoiding toll roads. My company avoids them like the plague. As for drivers who won't use maps, I say we use them as a replacement for speed bumps. And FL Trucker Wife wrote back in on this same subject. She said, "Yep, you summed it up. I've been telling Chris for a year that I'm surprised no one has come up with a truck-friendly mapping system online. The technology's there, but who's willing to take the time and money to do it is the question. I have to look up directions for Chris a lot. I always use Google, and I always go to Street View when it's available. It's saved him many times, but I agree that it's just not a reliable source of truck-friendly routes. Just today I was giving him directions to a receiver coming from the New Jersey Turnpike. Yeah, I know. The way Google directed me was to make a left on this one street. Only there were no left turns allowed. He had to find a street that allowed left turns, then get back to the original street to continue on. Crappy directions suck." Crappy directions suck, huh? Ah, my friend. The eloquence of words are once again with you. They do make GPS units that are designed for trucks, but I still don't trust them entirely. And they're stinking expensive to boot. And thank you for being a superb trucker's wife/navigator. I'm sure Chris appreciates it. As a matter of fact, most of us truckers out here could use a home navigator. Please enter your phone number here. Well, everybody, thanks for writing in on this one. I really appreciate it when you guys leave your comments because clearly you guys had some ideas that I left out of my post, so that's exactly what I'm looking for on these comments. Somebody either tell me I'm nuts or somebody to confirm what I'm saying. It makes me seem more credible, and God knows I need that. So anyway, how do you leave a comment? Well, here comes the information. So, what do you think about EOBRs? Do they bug you? Why? Please let me know if I'm totally missing some obvious atrocity here. Just type EOBR into the sexy little search bar at abouttruckdriving.com and leave your thoughts about this controversial subject. You can also reach me by email at the appropriately named truckerdump@gmail.com. If you're on Twitter like the rest of us geeks, give me a follow and a shout over there. Just search for Todd McCann and I'm sure to pop up. That's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. It's time once again to ask you for a favor by leaving a review on the podcast on iTunes. Gotta get them numbers up. Thanks a million. So until next time, drive safe and stay out of my way.